Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest Founders Live conversations. We are here today talking about 4 steps to build a brand that turns heads. And we have a special guest joining us today. We have Brian Button, and his company is called Your Brand. Your business needs a brand. We have Brian. Welcome to the conversation. We're going to have a huge discussion around branding and all of that. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, Brian, it is awesome to have you here, and cool enough. And we're going to hear about it. You have actually a tremendous background with brands that these people that are sitting in here are aware of and familiar with. Maybe they've utilized these companies, and so we're excited to hear about not only a bit of your past, your experience, but also then you diving into this discussion around really what is a brand, how to create it, and how to have that brand cohesion with everything that's a part of it. And so, what we'll do is hand it off to you. I know you have some visuals and slides to walk through, as well as for everyone. We will be periodically going through and really addressing any questions. And this is for time for you all to engage. So we want that. All right.
All right. All right, y'all. Well, like I said, super happy to be here. One of my little divisions of my company is called Your Business Needs a Brand. And that's exactly what it's all about, is trying to help you all with your business and turn it into a brand. And I'll get more into that as we go. But let me tell you a story first. So the year was 1962, and JFK was touring the NASA facilities. And he's walking around introducing himself to everyone, asking what they do. And he walks up to what is clearly a janitor. He's got the broom and the bucket and the mop. And JFK introduces himself, says, "Hey, I'm Jack. What do you do here?" And the janitor responds. He says, "Mr. President, I help get people to the moon." And in that one sentence, that individual employee linked not only his role and responsibility, but to the vision of NASA. And I just think that's a really interesting story about how we all, our companies have a purpose, have a vision, and there's no role that's too small within the organization to achieve that vision. Now, I assume none of us are here putting people on the moon, but we do take our job really seriously. And part of that is having that vision and being able to execute that vision and ensure that really everyone is on the same page to help you achieve that. So, probably time to introduce myself. My name is Brian Button. I'm happy to go by my last name, just Button. And I spent, the first 10 years of my career in creative advertising agencies, really kind of honing my craft as a creative copywriter. But my first, what we call in-house job or really brand side job was at Lyft. And this was probably 2015. I think I was employee 300 at Lyft back in those days. And, we touched everything. We did everything together. It was wonderful. But one of the most meaningful, impactful roles I played was really helping shape and define the Lyft brand. So, how we spoke, how we looked, who we spoke to, the channels in which we kind of communicated to our audiences. We really kind of defined every little piece of that brand, which really helped as we scaled up to about 5,000 employees. It really helped every one of those employees create work that is on brand, meaning it's consistent, it's intentional, it's strategic. And that's because we did that work of putting it all into the brand book. Went so far as when our founders were on the TED Talk stages or being interviewed by the press, they were kind of repeating things that we had created in this document, in this brand book. So really, really impactful. After Lyft, I went on to DoorDash and then Instacart and got to do really similar things there and helping kind of scale the business, but also define the brand. At Instacart, I was in charge of the brand marketing. So if you had seen any kind of commercials or content from Instacart a couple years ago, that was probably me and my team. And more recently, about a year ago, I resigned from these larger corporations to really help small businesses like you all, and really taking these strategies, these frameworks, these really effective methodologies, and applying them to small businesses. And here's a couple other logos that I'm currently working with now. Bad Birdie, if you're a golfer. Fight Camp is kind of the at-home boxing fitness training system. So really been privileged in working with a handful of really interesting companies. So what we're going to cover today, sorry, I don't know why these images aren't loading. There you go. What we're going to cover today, why brand matters, nailing your pitch, finding your voice. I have a great exercise called feels over features, which that'll make a little bit more sense as we get to that section. And then really kind of bringing it home with brand cohesion. Why is it important to have brand cohesion? And then I've left some room for some Q&A at the end. But as the guy said in the beginning, if there's any questions that you'll have throughout, please throw the hand raise function up, throw some stuff in the chat. Those guys will keep an eye on it for me. And then I want this to be interactive, more interactive, less lecture. But I've got some stuff to go through with y'all. So I like to open up with this quote, which I think is really interesting. If Nike opened a hotel, we would be able to guess pretty accurately what it would be like. If Hyatt came out with sneakers, we'd have no clue what they'd be like. That's because Hyatt doesn't have a brand. They have a logo. And Seth Godin said that. And I just think it's really, really important because a lot of the things that I teach and talk about is branding is so much more than a logo. A lot of folks think that a brand is a logo, is a color palette, is a font. And yes, that's true, but it's so much more than that. It has many layers, and so does an onion. And I was going to use an onion, but onions make me cry. So I figured cake makes me happy, and it's got a lot of layers, and so does your brand, and so does building a brand. It's got a lot of layers. But what I really focus on is really the definition of your product or service plus your reputation equals brand. And so my approach is really focusing on the reputation of your company. That's why I named it Your Business Needs a Brand. Your business needs a reputation. And that's really what I help my clients figure out, define, and build together. But like this GIF, there's a lot of layers to it. So we're just going to get to a few of these layers here. So why does brand matter? Let me tell you a story. So like I said, I was at Lyft. And at that time, we were just getting started. But Uber had been around for a while. They were already kind of pretty dominant. And, their logo, black, white, pretty clean, pretty stark. Even just the font is pretty rigid. It's kind of upright. And at that time, Lyft was magenta, in your face, kind of loopy and just fun. And it's got some charisma to it. So even just the juxtaposition of the logo kind of told you enough about these two companies if you really didn't know what each of them did. On the left at the time, Uber, their tagline was your personal driver. Their color palette and vibe was really all about being sleek and, the black cars and being very exclusive. And Lyft at that time, their tagline was your friend with a car. So already just a huge difference in how you approach these two companies or these two brands. We were all about being fun. We had these bright pink and magenta colors. We were very inclusive. When Uber was exclusive, we decided to go inclusive. Everyone was going to join our party. And even in their marketing materials, they had these images, black and white, people wearing suits or very formal kind of clothing. And really, if there was ever any passengers, they were in the back seat, either on the phone or on their laptop, just totally disconnected from the driver. But anything we did at Lyft, we always showed passengers up front next to the driver. We reinforced, your friend with a car. That's the driver, right? The driver is your friend with a car, when Uber was all about your personal driver. So Uber was all about this, what they used to call, not my words, but they called this baller lifestyle. If you wanted to show off and flaunt things, you got an Uber. If you wanted to go from A to B and have a good time and kind of be a part of a community, Lyft was your option, right? And at the end of the day, these are ubiquitous services. They do the same thing. But just look at the juxtaposition between the two brands. You've got this exclusive kind of highbrow on the left, and you've got this very inclusive, approachable, magnetic company on the right. And that's why we love Lyft. But you choose whichever one you want. But I just kind of illustrate the differences between even if your product or service is a ubiquity, it's all about your brand, and that's the difference, and that's what people remember, and that's really what helps people choose at the end of the day. So I can pause there if there's any questions about my time at Lyft. If you have any questions about maybe you're trying to go through the same thing, or you have some competition or maybe ubiquity that you need help breaking through, but happy to pause for questions, or if not, we can kind of keep rolling.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. Hey, everyone, can always feel free to post questions in the chat. Please do not be afraid to ask questions or chat. This is a group conversation. We want your engagement. Brian, your experience, you just showed a really interesting comparison and juxtaposition there. Let's take one more deep dive on that experience, which is like, man, if you could sum up, I mean, look, the elephant in the room is one of these brands is much, much larger than the other, that from a market cap standpoint. And in some ways, that kind of doesn't matter in the sense that they're both world recognized and great companies. So, how did you what was your experience like being in, forming this such friendly, like, I guess maybe take one step level deeper on, you know, basically carving out the corner of the market that you all wanted to actually own, given that you're illustrating here one side is sleek and kind of more exclusive and baller, and as a brand you do have to understand where the market is and what area that we're going to actually identify and own. So maybe just describe that a little further.
Yeah. We had a saying, or I picked up a saying along the way. Um, a lot of companies try to be everything to everyone. And when you do that, you actually end up being nothing to nobody. Right. And so we knew we could not compete with Uber globally. We could not compete with Uber financially. So from very early on, and I credit the founders with this, is they knew their niche. They knew their corner. They weren't going to get everyone, but they wanted to be the only option for a smaller subset of people, and they were okay with that. I heard a different quote. I think it was one of the first Airbnb investors. Is it better to 100 million people to, I'm going to butcher this quote, so I'm not directly quoting this individual, but is it better for 100 million people to know your brand or 100 people to love your brand? Right. So I think we get caught up in social media and things about follower count, but what is the quality of those followers? What is the quality of your audience? So again, just by volume, we knew we couldn't compete with Uber, but we knew that we were going to be special to the smaller subset of people, so much so that they were deleting Uber and Uber wasn't even an option for them. I think I still don't have Uber on my phone. It's been maybe 8 years since I've worked with Lyft. But people were just passionate about being inclusive, sitting up front, fist bumping the driver. Like there was just a whole vibe that Lyft created that people were really invested in, rather than always being in the back seat, not having a conversation with your driver, making the driver feel like they were, they were your chaperone, if you will. And that kind of turned people off, right? So even with Uber's decision, that led for that led people to come find Lyft, right? And so it was just we kind of knew that we weren't going to get everybody, but the smaller subset of folks that we were attracting, we were dedicated to them and making sure we were doing right by them.
Got it. Okay, cool. We have a few questions that I think
Great.
let's kind of run through, and then maybe there's also information later on that could help. But Malik has a question around actually in some. I'm just going to kind of reframe this question in some ways, but in how does the brand then sink into someone's pitch, and how they can define that brand, work the brand into their specific pitch. I do think these are like quite a bit interconnected, obviously, but their company is about self-awareness and personal transformation, and finding it hard to actually find that pitch. And by the way, Malak, I will drop in some information into this chat that we have resources to help startups with their pitch in general for the founders live pitch. But Brian, maybe speak some thoughts on like how does brand interact with really finding those words that then land into the market in that pitch.
Yep. So actually, the next section is all about nailing your pitch. And
Oh,
so we'll get into that. And I would love to maybe revisit this question if I didn't answer it. But my short answer now is, and this is my perspective, right? If you talk to anyone else in my role, they may have different answers. But my perspective is your company theoretically should exist to solve a customer's problem. And the closer you are to knowing and understanding your customer and really kind of being in service of them, that should be the pitch. That should be the reason why. That should be your vision, your mission, is really like understanding your customer, understanding what they're up against, and how your product or service helps solve their problem. And that's kind of a abstract answer. And again, the next section I think will help you break that down a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I think all this stuff should be in service of your customer.
All right, very good. Yeah, feel free to continue.
Okay, moving on. All right, so perfect timing, nailing your pitch. So just I like to start each of these sections with a quote that I think kind of really sets up the section. The clearer you are about the problem you solve, the more likely your customers are to listen. So I'll say that one more time. The clearer you are about the problem you solve, the more likely customers are to listen. So this is super important. When people ask you what you do or what your company is about, I think we start to like maybe drop our titles in. Well, I'm the creative director of such and such, or well, my dad started the company, and so we don't really know how to answer the question. And unfortunately, when we start to kind of rifle off the jargon and the terms, people hear this, and that's the last thing we want them to hear, right? So if we think about this quote, the more clear you are about the problem you solve, the more likely your customers are to listen. So that's why I really try to base everything around the customer. And it's a pretty simple template, really. You've got your problem, the problem you solve, the solution, what is the answer to that problem, and then what is the result, right? So if we think about the problem, I think over time it'd be really important for you all to own a problem. For example, if you have a runny nose, we think of Kleenex. If you have dry, chapped lips, we think of chapstick. If you have a marketing or branding problem, you think of me. That's my approach anyway. That's my hope. But really to think about what your business is or what your service is and what is that problem. That's really the thing to think about. And then if we go to the next one, it's all about the solution. So these two should be very, very linked. So if you set up your problem, how do you solve that problem? And this really should be through the filter of your customer. How do you solve your customer's problem? That's simply just the solution. And then what is the result of that? If you can solve that problem, what is the result? Again, maybe for your customer, but like what are the feelings? What are the emotions that you provide based on this? So let me give you a quick example. And this was kind of my version I put up here. So the problem, and I'm an entrepreneur as well. I'm bootstrapped. I'm kind of doing this all on my own. So I'm right there with y'all. Like I'm feeling this too, right? So it's many entrepreneurs struggle to craft a clear pitch that resonates. That's the problem. So I offer one-liner workshops that help founders clarify their message. That's the solution. So they can confidently pitch their business and attract the right investors. I put investors in there for the sake of this presentation, but you could easily swap that out for you attract the right customers. But that's the result, right? So we all have a problem of, I don't really know how to just like nail my pitch. Well, I offer these workshops that help you do that so that you can confidently pitch your business and attract the right investors or customers. And speaking of which, okay, sorry. So that's again, problem, solution, result. And then I was just thinking, if we wanted to do a little exercise, do it live. And if we take, was it Malik that was asking the question
Yeah.
from earlier? Okay, so maybe this is for everybody. I can't see anyone else who's on, but think about your company. Think about the problem you solve. Think about what the solution is, and then what would be the result. And I would say, let's take 60 seconds and just think it out. No wrong answers. Have fun. And if you want to, I'd love to share what you come up with on the chat.
Yeah, and just to kind of do a first one. So Malik mentioned self-awareness and personal transformation. And Malik, if you want to provide, feel free to even get kind of unmute and chat here a little bit. Talk if you want about what exactly are you finding that is the challenge or the problem that Brian could actually maybe pinpoint a little bit and help you through that, if you would like. If not, you can type you can type in the chat and we'll address it. But I think what I'm looking at here is like, um, how do you take branding and then wrap that into the pitch that maybe they're just trying to figure out the exact wording for. So anyone else, I will jump in and Brian, if you maybe want to critique us, Founders Live actually, um, I guess maybe the challenge for us is, we actually end up with a number of different customer segments. Okay, we have entrepreneurs and founders. We have what we call partners like yourself, companies that want to grow on top of Founders Live. We also then have Founders Live athletes, which is more of a for professional athletes turned entrepreneurs. And you all are kind of hearing it for the first time, but we're now going to roll out a Founders Live more around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's really cool. But the point is, we have a lot of different segments that generally fall into, entrepreneurs globally, but there's all these different customer segments. How do we create a brand and a brand message when we have numerous customer segments?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think I just mentioned my example of the one-liner workshop. And by the way, this QR code, if you all want to take a minute and snap a pic of it, this goes to my one-liner workshop that I'm offering. I'm trying to do them monthly based on attendance, but if you're interested or really want a workshop like Nick is doing now, these will be about 90 minutes once per month, kind of one and done. Would encourage you all to just take a look and check that out. But for you, Nick, yeah, it's interesting because again, back to trying to be everything to everyone, being very diligent about what is your core purpose, right? And so you could look at Founders Live as almost an umbrella because there are a lot of different segments or divisions beneath that. I think personally, one of the things that I was attracted to is being able to kind of penetrate your community or be a part of that community. So if we took that one, for example, you could say a lot of entrepreneurs or small business owners have trouble attracting the right clientele. That's why we started Founders Live or the partners for Founders Live is so that we can make more seamless connections so that you can find the right clients you want and go be successful, right? Bad example, but that's kind of the equation or the framework based on that. And that's just firsthand experience for me. But for Founders Live, I would go back to thinking about why you started it, right? Before all these other little, I'll call them subdivisions, popped up. What was that? What was that need, right? What was that itch that you were scratching that that made you kind of start it and form it? And again, I imagine you had an idea or you saw an opportunity, but at the end of the day, it was probably for folks like us. Maybe we didn't have something like this that existed, right? So again, going back to like the customer need. So without like busting out pen and paper and knocking this thing out, I would just say like if you were to do this exercise, it's really thinking about what was the problem you were trying to solve, how did you solve it, and then what was that like aspirational um, result at the end that you were hoping for, and being able to play that out because the goal of this, y'all, is really to make it repeatable. Again, I think a lot of us get asked all the time, what do we do? And we start talking about our business or our background, and back to that blah 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 gif, people kind of tune out when people ask what you do. They're really asking, can you help solve my problem? And they'll never be that direct, I don't think, but that's really what they're listening for subconsciously, and that's why you want to start with that problem because it kind of sends their antennas up and says, "Oh, that's actually my problem." So then, how can I solve it? And then, what's the result? So it's a really kind of 3-step process that if you can get it down and nail it, it should be really, really easily repeatable so that you can just go out and say that more confidently and start to get people's ears to perk up a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you. Malak has unmuted here. So thank you so much for joining in the conversation. Feel free to give a little more context in your question, and let's see if Brian can help you out a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much also for you, all of you. Actually, I find it extremely difficult because everyone can be interested in self-empowerment, understanding themselves on like the very level, the many levels, like emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So actually, it's more about my company, IO, called IO. More about like spiritual awakening and realizing the self on the deepest level. But I also wanted to be like practical information, practical knowledge for everyone to reconnect with their potential. So innate potential. So I find it very difficult. I try to be more active in my social media, trying to make content, trying to figure it out, what type of peoples I'm trying to touch, but I still find it very difficult to like specifically like focus on my own people who really want to be, who are interested, commitment to self-awareness and self-realization. But yeah, it's very wide topic.
Yeah.
You know, Brian, I'll just kind of step in. If you want to
Yeah.
go back to that slide. It really feels to me, and this is right there. Maybe talk a little bit about, because that's really like, what's the problem? Who has it? Here's how you solve it, which is the solution, and then the end result. Is that kind of where like that starts to narrow down into who actually in the end is the target market, and then your brand is really about how you do that and why, right? And then it starts to talk to the right people. Am I going down the right road here a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Malak, am I saying that correctly?
Malak.
Malak, okay. And
Yes.
something you just said is you mentioned potential.
Mm.
And I think that's a really powerful word. And I think, if you really break these three sections out and just start writing down maybe what is how do you fill in that blank? And the result, I think, is really powerful to reach your potential, however you want to word that is, if you have a problem, here's my service or offering that will help you reach your potential. And so thinking like Nick was saying, thinking about the problem, if you just keep asking why is that important, or what does that mean, or why do people seek self-fulfillment? There's usually a few different reasons, but you don't need to answer that yet. You just need to like nail the problem. And again, it's in the mind of maybe your customer, consumer, or community. What problem are you solving for them, so that you can position your product or service as the solution, and then you can help them. Again, that word potential can really fit in that result category, and just start writing those out. But just, I would encourage you to keep asking yourself, well, why is that important, or why does that matter, or does that matter? Because again, I think we fall into traps a lot by just trying to sound important, but there's not a lot of substance, right? And so just the more you can unpeel back and go down to like just that kind of that need that people are seeking, I think that's kind of the place to start.
Yeah. I every time I try to do what you are just saying, I found myself comes to the first question, and I ended up with writing a book, trying to explain how important to start the self-awareness journey. I started to, maybe it's for me even, this book even before it could be for others. So I started to write the importance of self-awareness, self transformation. What is it about? I ended up writing and like explaining the like us as a human being on each and every level, how it like how we function as a human beings. So I don't know this book, who is going to buy this book, or who is going to be interested in such deep and transformational information or knowledge. So yeah.
These are really, really good questions, and given that we just don't have too much time, maybe we'll make sure that you get Brian's information, and he can probably help you out a little later. But this is really great, everyone. Malik, thank you so much, and we hope that was a good,
Thank you for the opportunity.
good initial answer.
Yeah.
So, Brian, let's continue, and then I want to ear note that we do have Federica has a great question, but we can jump into that just a little later in the discussion, but feel free to move forward there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you again, Malak, for sharing that. I appreciate that. Okay. So the next section, we talked about why brand is important. We covered the surface level, really. We talked about how to nail your pitch, or really to better answer the question, what do you do? But now with your company, it's all about your voice, right? How does your company sound? And that's important because crafting a distinctive brand voice isn't just about words, it's about creating an emotional connection with your audience. So again, the way that I approach branding is really all about your audience, your customer, and having that emotional connection. And there's a really great exercise I have in the next section that will help us do that. But I don't want us to think about our brand voice as just words. They're more important than that, right? And it's really, how do you create an emotional connection with your audience? So I'd love everyone just to think about, if you want to throw it up on the chat, that's fine too. But just think about, if you don't have these brand voice tenants yet, or if you do, but just think about, if you were to describe the voice of your brand, how does it sound in 3 words? And just kind of have a think on that. Now, I'll just help you out real quick, because if you have words like human, friendly, honest, get in line, because all the other companies have that too. And my challenge is, what companies or brands don't want to be human or friendly or honest? So, meaning these are really table stakes. We want to use words that go a little deeper, because when every company uses these words, they don't really help you create a difference. They don't help you stand out. And there's no real emotional connection because they're so kind of generic. And even, the words underneath this: approachable, kind, social, these are all just kind of everyday words, right? And so I really challenge everyone to think about how to describe the voice of your brand, really the personality of your brand, and ask questions. Is your brand male or female? Is your brand funny or serious? Is your brand confident or curious? And just keep asking yourself these questions, and really let curiosity lead here. And just there's a lot of alone time. There's a lot of time with you, maybe in a pen and a paper, but really kind of doing that hard work of thinking about, 3 is usually the magic number. You can have up to 5 or 6, but I really suggest starting with 3, because the goal of having a brand voice is all about consistency. So whether you're, Malak, you mentioned social media. So whether you're on LinkedIn or TikTok, now those are 2 very different platforms, but to have a consistent brand voice, that allows your client, your customer, your community to get used to you and to be familiar with you and really start to trust you. So it's important to find these words that do the best job of describing the voice of your brand. For example, here's some things that we did at DoorDash. We defined DoorDash's voice as bold, optimistic, and relentless. And then we had 2 more just to kind of round them out. Of we were thoughtful and we were humble. We kind of always joked that DoorDash was the world's worst self-promoter, because we always wanted to give credit to what we called our merchants. They were our small and medium businesses, our restaurants. We wanted them. It was all because of them that we were successful. And in fact, when we went and took DoorDash public, we created all the material that featured the small businesses. We didn't talk about ourselves. We didn't say that because of our hard work, we get to go public. It was really, we featured our merchants, and we really celebrated them, which should have been our highest moment. We kind of gave the stage to our merchants. So we really followed these, not only in how we spoke, but really in our actions and how we conducted ourselves as a brand. At Instacart, and for those not familiar with Instacart, it's kind of a grocery delivery app, Uber Eats for groceries, if you will. And so, one of our main promises was we give you time back. If you do your grocery shopping on Instacart, that means you don't have to. So then you can spend more time with your family, or maybe you're working your job, or we give you time back. And so we wanted to be magnetic. We wanted to be alluring. We wanted people to be curious about us and drawn to us. So we'd use a little bit of wordplay. We'd be pretty smart about how we would communicate. But the other part is, we wanted to be joyful. We wanted to give you time back so that you could have more time to celebrate those everyday moments. So we were bright, we were colorful, we were happy. And then adventurous. That was our sneaky word of like, well, if we want to do a little bit more clever wordplay, if we want to have a bit more fun, let's just kind of throw that under the word adventurous, right? So that gave us a little bit more leeway to have some more fun. But these are just examples that we created over time at DoorDash and Instacart, just to show you, how different these 2 companies can be based on just how we sound and how we act. And then finally, if there's voice, there should be tone as well. And tone is really more the emotive, right? I think if we look at these as levers or dials, we can be all of these things, but really in everything that Instacart does, for example, we should always hit magnetic, joyful, adventurous. That should be the consistency I was talking about. But depending on the situation, maybe the folks that picked up the groceries and delivered the groceries, we just called them our shoppers. Maybe their paycheck didn't land, so we can't be casual. We can't be irreverent. We need to be a little bit more formal and serious, but it should still follow those brand voice tenets, right? So it really depends on the situation, the channel, the audience, and that's where these dials can really kind of go up or down based on all of those factors. So it is something you have to keep your eye on a little bit more, but really thinking about those main three tenets for how you want to define your brand's voice, and then using these as a little bit more of a dial. So I can pause there if there's any questions or thoughts. I think we're doing pretty okay on time. I've got just maybe one or two more sections to get through, but I don't know if there's any questions about voice and tone.
Brian, this is a good time to bring up another question that was written in here. Frederick has mentioned, and this kind of goes right to what you've pointed out. How would you suggest, especially early stage companies are forming this, but how would you adjust for demographics, right? Even looking at these dimensions of tone, let's say someone has a service for early retirees and they have to strike a balance between looking professional and then reaching the aspirational and catering to that specific group. And if you can kind of see here, you just mentioned that scenario even with Instacart, like how should we think about adjusting tone or the brand voice to maybe different demographic segments?
Mm-hmm. So I'll say, as far as brand voice, I'll give you an example at Lyft. At Lyft, we had our passengers and we had our drivers. And so we actually created two different brand voice tenets for those, because there was so much, what we say, there's so much daylight between the two. They were very rarely overlapped. And so with drivers, they could suss out marketing. They called BS on all that. So we had to be very direct. We had to be very pragmatic. We had to be very clear and supportive. And then with our rider audience, our passenger audience, we wanted to be fun. We wanted to be mischievous. We wanted to be out there because that was so different than Uber, right? So we actually had to make those distinctions even among our different communities. And then with tone, again, it's really situational. So thinking about the different social platforms. At LinkedIn, we joke it's like going to dinner with your parents' friends, right? So you're going to talk about your achievements. You're going to talk about a little bit more professional. But Instagram or TikTok, it's like going out with your friends. You can kind of be a little unhinged and be fun if that's appropriate for your brand. So, it can come from the same brand, but it just really depends on who you're talking to and what the situation is. So I would encourage, if you have different audiences, and I'm not trying to spin up a bunch of work for you, but if you have different audiences that don't look at each other or aren't relevant to one another, maybe think about having bespoke guidelines for each audience. And again, y'all, the goal is, if you are doing the work, if you're hiring someone to do the work, if you're partnering with someone, there is this document that anybody should be able, if we're talking about brand voice, anybody should be able to use and write so that it's on brand, meaning it's consistent. And for those that don't have any of this executed yet, I would just encourage you to think about trial and error. What have you created out in the world, and how could you sum up the tone and the voice of that material? And, when you have your three, use that as a filter. When you start to write stuff, is it playful? Is it confident? Is it empowering? And use that as a filter. And if it's not really working or feeling forceful, you are always free to adjust, right? These are living, breathing documents. If I were to show you a PDF of some of the brand book guidelines we did for Instacart a year and a half ago, I could guarantee you that they're probably already changed again. Because as companies evolve, as situations happen, you learn, you iterate, and you always try to modernize. And so don't put so much pressure on yourself that this is a Rosetta Stone. I think it should be to an extent, as far as like right now and in the near future. But again, if you're building this as you're going, be a little looser, be more curious, and then jot this stuff down. And again, use it as a filter so that you can create consistent, keyword effective communication and marketing.
That's great. That was very helpful. And in the end, everyone, and this probably speaks to more than than I would think actually is if you do have different customer segments, think about breaking it down into two different groups of how you're speaking to them and all of that. So this is very, very helpful. Um, Really great. We are definitely moving along here in terms of time. So, Brian, if you have a few more things to get to,
Yep.
but let's go about 5 more minutes, and then we'll just make sure that we can close up with any last questions and thoughts.
Great. Yeah, good. We can close with this. I have kind of a summary slide, but this is probably more important and way more interesting in my opinion. So I like to call this feels over features. I think a lot of companies, and again, Lyft, DoorDash, Instacart, the big places I worked at were just as guilty of this as any other company. We are so happy and proud about our product features that's all we want to talk about. But we forget that we skipped a couple steps, and people don't care about product features. They care about how it's going to solve their problem, right? So how can we start with a product or service, and then in a few steps, which I'll show you, get to an emotional benefit for your consumer, because that's what they care about. So in the world of marketing, the emotional connection you create is your most valuable asset. It's what makes customers choose you over the competition. So again, if we go back to Uber and Lyft, Uber, I would say, and I'm biased, but Uber, I'd say, was really lacking emotion. They wanted to make you feel higher, better, cooler, whatever. Lyft was all about that emotional connection. We wanted to make you feel at home. We wanted to make you feel like you had, your friend with a car. It was very intentional about that emotional connection that we created. And so what I'll show you now, I call this the benefits ladder. And if you start at the upper right, let's figure out who our customer is. That's really the most important thing, because if you don't know who your customer is, I think it's gonna be really hard to be effective. It's really hard to be successful. And at the end of the day, your product or service should be in service of a customer. And so just think about the archetype or the individual or the community you're trying to target. And now if you direct your attention to the center in this little ladder here, if we go to the bottom, right, we start with our product feature. What is the most distinguishing feature of your product or your service? And then we play this game. Well, what is the benefit of that? Well, we go into a product benefit. So what does the product do, right? So we're just starting, like, these are the layers I was talking about. We start to kind of unpack and ask ourselves these questions. From the product benefit, we want to ask, well, what's the benefit of that? Well, we land ourselves in the customer benefit. What does the customer get from this? What do they get out of this? And then finally, you just ask yourself that question one more time. What is the benefit of that? Well, how does it make them feel, right? So isn't that crazy? From the most distinguishing feature of your product or service, in just a few steps, how does it make your customer feel, right? I love that. So let me give you an example. Gatorade, their target consumer, male and female athletes, basically between 14, 24. So student athletes, that's really who they're going after. Their product feature is 7% electrolyte formulation. Now, could you imagine Gatorade's commercials and marketing if that's just all they talked about? How boring, right? No one cares. Like, what does that even mean? I don't even know hardly what that means, except probably sugar water. So they play this game, right? Well, what's the benefit of their product feature? Well, their product benefit is it replenishes minerals and fluids. They're talking to student athletes who are out there exercising and running and exerting energy. So they are going to replenish minerals and fluids. Well, what does a customer get out of that? Well, it enables them to play longer and harder. That's cool. That's neat. Like, they could probably stop there, but what's the emotional benefit? Well, as a consumer, it makes me feel like I have a competitive advantage. It makes me feel like a winner. That is powerful. From 7% electrolyte formulation to it makes me feel like a winner. And that's why their marketing is the way it is. I think their tagline is it in you? Right? So they could talk about the electrolytes. Is that in you? They're talking about being a winner. Is that in you? And that's brought to you by Gatorade. I have a commercial to play, but we'll skip it. But if you just YouTube any recent Gatorade commercial, it's all about refilling up kind of the spirit of the athlete, because if you're a Gatorade consumer, you have a competitive advantage because you feel like a winner, which I think is just so cool. So let me skip this. So 2 more quick examples. For Lego, I think we all are familiar with Lego. Their target consumer, children, usually 5 to 12, but also adults with a passion for building for building and nostalgia, and family seeking shared activities. So, this is interesting for some of you folks that have maybe different consumers or customers. Lego's right there with you. right? Yes, they're geared towards children, but I've got 3 kids. I still love playing with Legos. They've got Star Wars and all these other ones that are probably more for the adult audience. So they've been able to really adapt and have a lot of different consumers. But more importantly, to the benefits ladder. So their product feature is, as we know, their bricks are designed to fit together in multiple ways. What's the benefit of that? Well, you can build endless creations. Okay, neat, fun. What's the benefit? Well, as a customer, you're never going to get bored, which is very true, which is awesome. And again, you could stop there, but let's get to the emotion. The emotional benefit is they inspire minds to bring fresh thinking to more complex problems. Wow. From bricks designed to fit in multiple ways to inspiring minds to bring fresh thinking to more complex problems. If you've all seen any Lego ads before, I mean, that nails it, right? There's that blue kind of surface with a little white like L shape. And, you just can imagine that it's a telescope and a submarine and see, it's just so creative and so inspiring. So I love that. Final example, Airbnb. Their target consumer are travelers who are looking for alternative lodging options to traditional hotels. Great. Their product feature is they offer short-term rentals from single rooms to entire houses around the world. Great. What's the benefit of that? Well, it allows you the ability to stay in homes anywhere in the world. As a customer, it makes traveling to new places easier because I feel at home. But really, the emotional benefit is I feel like I belong anywhere. And that's why they ended up with their tagline. I don't know if they still use it, but at one point, their tagline was Airbnb, belong anywhere. And so that's just such a great emotional connection. And really separates them from hotels or even other kind of short-term lodging. So another QR code for y'all. If you want to snap this, I actually have this on my website, free for you all. If you look for this like light blue section, maybe about halfway down from my website, enter some information, and then this will be sent to you. And so you can actually play this out with your own company. Your own business. And it gives you these examples we walk through, as well as a couple, I think maybe 3 or 4 sheets where you can, a fillable PDF where you can try it as well. All right. And then I was just going to go through kind of why it's important to be consistent with your brand. But let me just end with this quote. And before we go to Q&A, I'll just end it with this. Every interaction in any form is branding. So I want you all to remember that. It's not a logo. It's not a color palette. Every interaction in any form is branding. So that's why what we do is pretty important and should be fun, be curious, be relentless. Final QR code. I think that's 3 QR codes. I think that's the limit, just in general, like no more than 3. But I'd encourage you all to snap this because this is where I offer my courses. I've got an on-demand course for busy entrepreneurs. I've got that one-liner workshop I talked about. And currently, I've got 5 seats left on an interactive 6-week workshop where we go through all of this more extensively, in addition to a few other things that are really, really important to build your brand. So snap that, check it out. Want to end with questions, but really got some info here. Yourbusinessneedsabrand.com is the website. Hey there at brianbutton.co is how you get a hold of me, and a phone number for text and calls if you want.
Awesome.
So sorry for speeding through the last section, but I know we're tight on time.
It's all good. It's all good. There's a question in here around, is there any shift or difference between a service company versus products? You just walked through a number of examples that were kind of, in some ways, product oriented. Would you suggest any different thinking here if you have more of a service business? I would maybe assume not, but there might be a few little details that you might want to point out here.
I don't know if you could tell, but I use them interchangeably. I do look at them as kind of, for this exercise, one and the same. I think if we were to work together, we would definitely get a little bit more granular. I don't want to just be dismissive and say it's semantics, but that's the world we live in. And so I think at the end of the day, your service is your product. If you're landscaping and cleaning leaves, your service is a clean yard or a yard that you can go play in, right? And so it's just, again, it's the emotional benefit and how you spin that. And so it's just a matter of how you break that down and what you want to leave the customer with. Because while Gatorade is a tangible thing, it is very much a product. Lyft, it gets you from A to B, but also the product was how it made you feel. So it's really about how you approach it.
Yeah. Yeah, my closing thoughts here are amazingly, it's very similar to that last slide, that thought from Seth Godin. Brand is everything of the experience. And we think about this with Founders Live when we have events. I mean, we have things happen all over the world, and crazy enough, we also we have what we call our city leaders that run our events. I mean, in some ways there's a heck of a lot of trust in that individual to carry on the brand experience that that especially in other countries. So we're very aware that brand is full. It's a 360 kind of four-dimensional actual experience. And I would just hope that everyone that kind of fully embraces what has been is laid down here from Brian. This is really, really amazing. Getting a lot of really thanks, and people are enjoying it. Brian, okay, so we have your link, especially to your website. That's basically, of course, where people outside of scanning that QR code, people can find for that workshop as well, right? For the boot camp, actually.
Yes.
We're dropping some links in there, and
Awesome.
yeah. Any last words here?
Well, yeah, thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you for your time. I'll just say in closing, at these big places I worked, Lyft, DoorDash, they were DoorDash specifically around for about 10 years before they invested in the brand, right? They were a ubiquity. They were a food delivery. And when I asked the question, what's the difference? Why would someone choose you over Uber Eats or Grubhub? And they didn't have a very good answer. And that's when I knew I had some work to do, right? And so I just want to encourage all of you, branding is not a nice to have. It is literally the difference that you're going to create between you and any potential competitors, because the way that you approach it is to be the solution for your customer, right? Be there for your customer, be there for your community, and really have them in mind when you start to build this out and think through those things, because that will be the difference. And yeah, if you couldn't tell by the 3 QR codes, I'm here to help if you need some help.
Wow, thank you so much. So true. And, hey, everyone, this is so important no matter what stage you're in, and especially earlier. The earlier, the better to go through these early steps. And, as we heard, it evolves. Don't get wrapped around the tree that it's like, it has to be perfect. It's really just about the movement forward, and having a mind to evolve your voice and your brand and all of that as it goes forward. So, Brian, thank you so much. Everyone, check out the links. Definitely that boot camp sounds really, really attractive and awesome. So good luck with that. I know that's next week, correct? Or
yeah, if I can, I've got these 5 seats available. If we can fill those up, hopefully we get started next week on this like 6-week workshop to go deep on all the things we just covered.
All right. So really, really cool. Thank you, everyone. This is Founders Live Conversations. We have more coming up over the course of the next few weeks and months. So please look out for that, and look out for more stuff from Brian. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.